Demon Hunters 7 Extrication, written by Avril Sabine. Dedication. For my parents. For all three of them. I'm lucky to have had so many, and that they have encouraged me in my dreams. Book description. Esther is determined to change her life around. To stop mourning, stop being angry, and most of all to stop getting into fights. She decides it's going to take a new attitude, a new city, and a new job. As always, things don't go according to plan, and she's left wondering who will mourn her if the worst happens. Chapter 1. Esther stepped off the bus, remaining on the grassed footpath while it drove away. She wiped the palms of her hands against her knee-length black skirt as she watched the bus disappear around the corner. The day was a little cool, being that it was late May, but not so cold that she needed to wear a jumper and long pants. Which was a good thing, since her only option would have been worn jeans and faded jumpers. After wiping her hands against the skirt once more, she took a folded piece of paper from the handbag she'd picked up recently at an op shop for a couple of dollars. She couldn't very well have turned up at the interview using her backpack as a handbag. She opened the piece of paper and stared at the address. Her stomach did a long, slow turn. What was she thinking? No experience required didn't mean they'd be interested in someone who'd just turned 18 for a personal assistant. She halted the negative thoughts that began to form. Things would be different. She straightened her shoulders and slipped the piece of paper back into the handbag. A new town, well, technically a city, hopefully a new job, and no one here that knew her past. Or at least the parts of it she didn't want to share. Yet she continued to stand where she was, trying to convince herself to take another step forward. She'd spent an hour braiding her plain brown hair back from her face, applying a light dusting of makeup, and choosing what to wear from her limited wardrobe, all done in the bathroom at the bus terminal. Luckily her clothes didn't need to be ironed, and the creases had fallen out when she shook them after taking them from her backpack. She'd chosen a green blouse the sales assistant had told her made her hazel eyes look almost green, which had to be better than their usual murky color. Her resume was neatly typed and in a folder she'd put in the spacious handbag. All she had to do was walk down the street to the house where the interview was being held, and lie convincingly. She'd had plenty of practice at lying over the years. To teachers, foster parents, and occasionally the police. Yet this felt different. Important. Without this job, her only option would be to return to Morayfield and move back in with her uncle and cousins she'd lived with since finishing Year 12 last November. They'd been just as unhappy to have her turn up unexpectedly on the doorstep as she'd been to arrive there. Esther forced herself to head down the street. She couldn't stand where she was all afternoon. Besides ending up late for the interview, this looked like the kind of neighborhood where people would object to strangers standing out the front of their homes. Walking under a fig tree, she felt the ridges of the roots beneath the thin soles of her slip-on shoes. She couldn't have worn her scuffed boots. They hadn't looked fancy enough for a personal assistant. Doubts hit her again. She wasn't fancy enough to be a personal assistant. Her steps slowed as she approached a paved driveway leading to the door of the two-story house. The front of the building was filled with large glass doors that, although capable of being opened, led nowhere. Fancy iron railings prevented anyone from stepping outside. There were two on either side of the large double timber entrance doors that were set in the middle of the building, and another two above each of them. Curtains were drawn back at the glass doors and she caught glimpses of antique furniture. What had she been thinking? A job requiring no experience and providing room and board might sound great, but she had no hope of getting it. As one of her earlier foster parents would have said, her expectations of the world were unrealistic. As she headed for the door, her steps slowed further and she was nearly at a standstill. The door swung open and a young man stepped out, glaring at a broad-shouldered man in a suit. "I could do the job as good as any female. Maybe better." The broad-shouldered man crossed his arms over his chest. The ad was specific. Females only may apply. Alvera would not feel comfortable having a young man stay in the house with her of an evening. I wouldn't. The man interrupted. You may go. With a glare, the young man strolled down the driveway. He barely glanced at Esther. The broad-shouldered man remained in the doorway. Are you the 2 o'clock appointment? Nodding, Esther hurried forward. Sorry. I'm a little early. The man looked past her. I'd say you're right on time since the 1:30 appointment has already ended. He stepped back out of the doorway and gestured for her to enter. She resisted the urge to wipe her hands against her skirt again. Her palms felt damp and her stomach once again did a long, slow turn. Thank you. She entered the house, the pale timber floorboards of the foyer smooth and hard beneath her shoes. This way, please. She looked upwards as she followed him further into the house. A fancy wrought-iron railing, which matched the railing of the stairs on her left, edged the open section of the floor upstairs. All she could see from this angle were carpeted hallways. They entered a set of doors directly ahead, stepping around the timber table and heading to the right where 2 3-seater lounge suites were set along 2 sides of a coffee table. A woman sat in the middle of the lounge suite, that faced the direction of the front of the house. She appeared to be in her late 30s and her long black hair was a single length, brushed back from her face to cascade down her back. Her makeup, like her dress, was elegant and understated, and her dark eyes examined Esther. Your 2 o'clock appointment is early, Alvera. The woman inclined her head. Thank you, Norman. That will be all for now. Her gaze remained on Esther. She gestured to the other lounge suite. Take a seat. Before she sat down, Esther took the folder from her handbag and removed the resume, placing it on the coffee table in front of Alvera. She felt uncomfortable with the woman staring at her. You have a beautiful house. The words felt lame the moment she'd spoken them. It's a contemporary take on the French provincial style. Old-world elegance with contemporary style and convenience. Alvera stared at her a moment longer before she picked up the resume and glanced over it. Esther. A rather biblical name. She had no idea how to reply to that comment, so she remained silent. Something that more than one school guidance counselor had suggested she do. Although they normally made that comment about her back answering. Is your family religious? Esther almost shrugged. The surroundings seemed too elegant for something as simple as a shrug. I'm an orphan. No extended family? She wasn't about to mention her uncle and cousins. Especially since her oldest cousin had a police record. It wasn't like she planned to have anything further to do with them. That was if she could get this job. I was placed with a foster family when I was 11. Alvera again glanced at the resume. You have been with them the past 7 years? They relocated to another town and my caseworker decided it was best I stay in the area I was accustomed to, and another foster family was found for me. She met Alvera's gaze. It was partly the truth. It was the comment her caseworker had made when her foster family had said there was no way they wanted her to go with them. And your current foster family? Are you close to them? She wanted to demand what any of this had to do with the job. Breathing out slowly, she frantically tried to come up with a suitable answer. I finished with the foster system when I completed year 12 last year. Does that mean you no longer have anything to do with your last foster parents? Her foster parents had been the ones who were religious. They'd given her regular, sad looks and promised to pray for her. She nearly shrugged, her gaze momentarily drawn to the elegant surroundings. Taking in children is their calling. I moved out to make way for other children in need of a place to live. How very noble of them." Not knowing if Alvera was being sarcastic, or if she was complimenting them, she remained silent. It probably was noble of them. They'd driven her crazy with their long-suffering looks and continual promises to pray for her. She hadn't needed their pity. Alvera placed the resume on the coffee table. "Where have you been living since you moved out of their home, and what have you been doing? You haven't listed a single job." Again she made herself remain still when she would have preferred to shrug. An acquaintance from school and her family needed someone to look after their house while they were overseas. "They returned at the same time as I saw your ad, so I emailed you regarding an interview." She tried to remain relaxed, smiling in an effort to help herself with that. "It's the first time I've been to Brisbane, even though where I lived with them on the Sunshine Coast really isn't that far from here." She didn't bother mentioning the weeks she'd spent in Brisbane when she'd run away at 13. They didn't count. Nor the time she'd spent with her uncle and cousins in Morayfield. Alvera studied her. "You have no family, no job history, and this is the first time you've been to Brisbane." Her heart sank. This was it. Alvera was about to tell her she wasn't suitable. The ad said experience wasn't necessary. "Answer the question." Her hands started to curl into fists at the tone Alvera used. She stopped them in mid-motion. "I have always had chores with each foster family I stayed with, and my parents had no siblings." She wasn't about to count her mother's brother. Besides, he had only been her half-brother. "And this is the first time I've been to Brisbane. I don't know the area or anyone here, but I'm sure I can find my way around quickly." No boyfriend to interrupt your time? Friends who will demand you attend social events with them? No one. Alvera looked her up and down. "I find that hard to believe. Are you honestly telling me you are completely alone in this world?" She wanted a fresh start. That wouldn't happen if she dragged her old baggage with her. "I broke up with my boyfriend when he went south to uni, and my best friend moved to North Queensland with her family at the start of the year, and we've drifted apart." Those lies seemed preferable to telling Alvera that her friend had been chosen for the amount of trouble she could cause, and she'd been half-heartedly dating a boy who owned a motorbike because it annoyed her foster parents. Or at least it had caused those sorrowful looks of theirs. She'd never been able to get them to raise their voices in anger. No, she was the only one who'd given in to anger. But not anymore. She was starting afresh. "Stand up and turn around." Alvera made a movement with her hand to indicate spinning. Esther didn't immediately move. When she did, she slowly turned, feeling awkward. What did this have to do with the job? She nearly blurted out the question. "At least you're not ugly. Your lack of fashion can be fixed. Have you ever considered changing your name?" Esther stared at Alvera, not sure she'd heard right. "My name?" Alvera made a dismissive gesture with her hand. "Sit down. No need to tower over me like that." Esther dropped onto the lounge suite. She barely managed to bite back the words that wanted to escape. Alvera had been the one who'd told her to stand up. "When can you start?" Alvera asked. Esther opened her mouth. Not a single word came out. "Surely it isn't that difficult a question." "No." She blurted the word out. "Or whenever suits you. I have no other commitments." She didn't have much of anything, not just commitments. But that would change. It was time to get on with her life and stop being angry at everything that had happened. "If you let Norman know the address, he can collect your luggage for you." Alvera rose to her feet. "There is a full list of the services I use on the coffee table in the drawing room at the front of the house, along with other details you will need." She started towards the doorway that led to the front of the house. There will be no need for you to go upstairs. She glanced over her shoulder. Don't sit there. Follow.